Hello, Society members and our viewers from around the world. This is Charles Knippen, the President of the National Society of Leadership and Success, and I'd like to welcome you to another Thought Leaders series. In this series, we sit down with world leaders to get their insights and to hear their stories. And today, I'm very happy to be sitting with Professor Sidney Finkelstein, or better known as Dr. Sid. Dr. Sid is a faculty director at Dartmouth College for the Tuck Center for Leadership and also the Tuck Executive Program. He's joining us today to talk about his new book, Superbosses. And this is in addition to his writing, where he has published over 80 articles and 21 books, including his #1 bestseller, Why Smart Executives Fail. His work has been featured in Business Week, the London Times, and Fast Company, and a variety of other media outlets. He has also been named one of the 25 top gurus in leadership. So, Dr. Sid, thank you for being here with us today.
Great to talk to you, Charles.
Wonderful. So let's kick it off. One of the opportunities that we like to give our viewers, students from around the world, the variety of different colleges, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, variety of ages, traditional students, non-traditional students. We want to give them opportunity to hear your story, to where you started as a student. For some of them, they were young, or maybe they're returning to college. But what's your unique story? What were some of the critical points along the way where you got to shape your own leadership experience? And can you share that story with us?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Canada, in Montreal, and I went to a school called Concordia University. And turned out I was pretty good at school, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up applying to all sorts of different things. Law school, business school, PhD programs, and even some regular jobs. And at the end, I decided I wanted to move away. I wanted to live somewhere different. And I thought London would be good. And I applied to London School of Economics for their master's degree program. And I was accepted, so I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And so it wasn't, again, a strategy, even though I studied as an academic strategy. I didn't have a strategy. I kind of let things happen, and at each step of the way, evaluating and thinking about what was the right thing to do. And even if it wasn't the right thing to do, it's not the end of the world. You learn from it and you move on. And what happened, like many things in life, surprises happen. And I'm there in London doing my schooling, and the chairman of the Department of Management back at Concordia, where I had just graduated from, was in Europe, came to London, and came to talk to me because he wanted to offer me a job as an instructor to come back. And you have to think about that, instructor. I would have been 23 years old. I really, truly didn't know anything compared to what I think about I've done over the years. But what an idea to go back and actually be a teacher. And I decided, sure, why wouldn't I want to do that? I wasn't planning to, and that wasn't my career track. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So you take advantage of opportunities that come your way. You don't get too hung up on whether it's exactly the right or the wrong thing, which, I think a lot of people do that, especially now. The decision about what school, what university you go to, people just totally freak out about that. But the number of people that switch schools is gigantic. And if you're adaptable, if you're flexible, if you're open-minded, you can make almost anything work. And so anyways, I went back, I taught for a couple of years, and then I had another one of these big watershed moments where I was doing great, I loved it, and my department chair, I was expecting to get a renewed contract after 2 years. I was going to do another 2 years. And the department chair said, no, we're not going to renew your contract. And naturally, that was not a particularly fun thing to hear. And he said, it's not that you're not doing a good job, you're great, but if you are serious about this, you have to go get a PhD. And we're not going to keep you. We're going to basically force you to make a decision. He didn't say that, but that was the message. And it's really interesting because what that department chair did is so close to what, and I know we'll talk about it, what superbosses actually do. They create opportunities for other people, even when those people don't even know of their potential or don't even know what those opportunities could be. And so I was out of a job. I had to make another decision. And I said, all right, let's try graduate school. Let's go to get a PhD. And again, I didn't know if that was going to work or not, but I did it, and I found that really fascinating. And I was fortunate. I had some great advisors and mentors. And one of the things I learned is that this is a profession where your job is to come up with interesting questions, and then you go try to figure out the answer to that question. And that fit exactly what I like to do and what I was all about. And I ended up graduating and working and taking a job in academia over in LA, University of Southern California. And then after a number of years got recruited to come back east and work at Dartmouth College.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that journey with us. And that's just scratching the surface, but it kind of brings us up to this point where 2 months ago, you released a new book, as you referenced, Superbosses. So can you tell our audience a little bit about that book and what you hope readers are taking away from it?
Sure. Well, so Superboss, a Superboss, is a leader, a manager, a boss that helps other people accomplish more than they ever thought possible, and as a result, accelerate their career. So I'm talking about people like Ralph Lauren in fashion, George Lucas in special effects and film, Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live, and what they all have in common, every one of them, is if you go look at the senior executives, if you will, or the success stories in an industry, and you do a genealogical study of them, meaning not who their parents were, but who they work for. What you do is you develop these trees of talent, and when you do that, you discover these are the people at the top of those lists. In other words, you look at fashion, the number of people that work for Ralph Lauren, both in the design side and the management side, is absolutely stunning. I think people like Vera Wang and Tory Burch and John Varvatos, Joseph Abboud, John Idle, who's the CEO of Michael Kors. I mean, the list is unbelievable. And every one of these people have spawned some of the world's best talent. And I gave them a name. The name I gave them is called Superboss. So obviously, it's a really good thing to kind of find a superboss and try to work for, especially early on in your career. And then what I spent a lot of my time studying and trying to understand is what do they do in common? They come from 18 different industries, different personalities, different styles. But in fact, what they have in common is a whole bunch of things about how they look for unusual talent, how they motivate people, how they inspire people, how they truly have a vision about what they care about and are able to communicate that vision, how they unleash the creativity of the people around them, which, by the way, for everyone about to enter the workforce, it's not always that way, unfortunately. But if you can have a boss that wants to hear what you have to say, that wants you to have an impact, that wants you to come up with new ideas, that's a fantastic thing. And they manage the flow of talent in their organizations, which means not just finding great people, not just helping them and developing them, but sometimes even managing them to their next stage of career, even if that's not in the same company. So there's a lot of counterintuitive things that superbosses do, and it's immensely practical, because every organization struggles with finding great people and developing those people and accomplishing all the things you want to accomplish. In fact, that is probably the number one challenge for CEOs, for senior executives. Superbosses have figured out a way to do it that's very different than standard practice, and that's what's making it really exciting.
That's fantastic, and just a great insight, and just the number of different industries, as you mentioned, represented. For our students who are sitting there kind of on the opposite side of not thinking about being a super boss yet,
right,
but as you mentioned, looking for a super boss, what are some of those common things that they should be seeing as far as, or looking for, when they are doing it, sitting in their interviews, or meeting with their boss for the first time, or how can they help nurture that relationship to turn it into something like a super boss relationship?
Right. So step one is to recognize that you have a responsibility to look for your boss and look for the right boss. Right away, that's different. Most people think, I got to get a job, and I get that, and sometimes you don't have a lot of choices. And maybe early on you don't have as many choices, but I think you want to be thinking about the idea of being able to pick your boss. It doesn't always happen, but at least it won't happen if you don't start with that. Now, what are you looking for? I like the idea of people interviewing their interviewer, and in particular, this is when the interviewer is your prospective boss, because you could be interviewed by HR or by a recruiter, and that's fine. But when it's your prospective boss, start asking some questions, and they're legitimate, reasonable questions. For example, most people, when they're looking for a job and going through the interview, they want to know what their day is going to look like. What are my responsibilities? What are you looking for me to accomplish? Yes, you'll talk about that, but then ask your boss. Tell me about what your day is like. First of all, it's going to surprise them, and they're going to begin to think this person got some interesting insight about things. But that's a positive side effect. What you want to hear is how they spend their time. And if they spend their time in meeting after meeting after meeting, that's a warning sign, because that means that they're not leaving themselves any time for freelancing, if you will, for spending the time one-on-one with people on their teams. They're allowing their schedule to be controlled by other people. I can't outlaw meetings. I think that would make me a saint in the world of business. Nobody could do that. But too many people allow meetings to dominate their entire careers, their entire days. And then the other thing I think you could ask about is to tell me about some of the people that used to work for you. Where are they today? What are they doing today? Now, here's what you look for. If the prospective boss says, out of sight, out of mind, they're dead to me, they probably won't say that, but you get that message.
Yeah.
It tells you a lot about them, which is to say they're not at all super bosses, because super bosses continue a relationship with people even after they've left. They look for business opportunities. They're not just friendly in a kind of a, quote, networking way, although they might do that, but they're always looking for opportunities to continue to work together. I mean, you think about a classic example, Lorne Michaels is from Saturday Night Live. You look at two of his superstars of the last 5 years, and you look at who are the hosts of NBC's late night shows. You have Jimmy Fallon and you have Seth Meyers, two giants from the show. Now, Lorne Michaels knew these people were going to go. They were getting offers for all sorts of things. It turns out that he helped them get those jobs. And it turns out also Lorne Michaels is the executive producer of those shows. So not only is he helping people in his team, but he's actually capitalizing on it financially and probably reputationally as well. So I'd like to know, if you're the prospective boss, tell me about some of the people who work for you. Where are they today? And you want to hear people have a sense of pride that, Mary used to work for me. She spent the first 5 years of her career, and now she's running this thing or doing that. That's what you want to hear, because these are people that are going to be more likely to care about your development. And the upside is gigantic if you can find something like that.
And so let me ask you this, for our students who are thinking about their first job, but then also for the employers who are hiring these students, what about the issue of small company versus large company, and finding that career path and identifying that, I'm the prospective student and I look at a small company, I go, well, there doesn't look like there'll be as much opportunity. Or from the flip side of that, I'm a large company and I can kind of create your career path here.
Right.
How does that impact that, and what should our students be thinking about as they're venturing into these?
It is a tough call. I get a version of that question from my own students all the time. So obviously in a small company, the plus is that you could have an opportunity to do a lot of different things. But if the job in that small company is such that you're not going to get that opportunity, you're losing the benefit of that small company. In a big company, they tend to have these more career ladders, step by step, which, by the way, super bosses don't like career ladders. If they see somebody that's great, they'll push them up 2 levels. They'll give them a giant opportunity, which is what you want to look for, right? And so on the one hand, you can get super bosses anywhere, small or big, so that's not a differentiator. But with respect to a big company, the value could come from the training that they give you. Now, if they give you real training, there's a lot of job rotation programs that some of my students will go into for 2 years, where you do different things, sometimes different divisions or functions, sometimes even different countries. Well, that's a really valuable experience if you can get that. But if you're just going to get a job in a big company and you get kind of locked into a particular place and you don't get the upside of all their resources, then I don't think it's so beneficial. So I guess my answer is not small versus big, one is better than the other. It's do your due diligence in that. What's your job going to be like? Who are you going to work for? And based on that, you get a better sense of what's right for you.
I want to switch the topic over to, what are some of the foundations that our students should be, that you could give our students about leadership, that, where they are sitting right now as students, that they can take with them into the future to help them build that successful foundation? Right.
Well, I think there are a lot of things we could say about leadership, of course, but I think there are 3 things that I would really focus on. One is around opportunity, and opportunities don't just come. Sometimes when you're young, you don't recognize that. There are people that look back when they're 40 and say, boy, I wish I took that. When an opportunity comes, the difference between the people that are going to be really successful and the people that are not is they're much more likely to take that opportunity. That doesn't mean it works. You got to be willing to accept the risk of it not working and be able to get back up. Resilience is really important. But I think number one, when it comes to being an effective leader, it's recognizing those opportunities, over time hopefully creating those opportunities, but early on recognizing those opportunities. I think number 2 is all about learning. Learning doesn't end at school. In fact, learning begins at school. If you think you know what you're doing when you graduate from school, then you really are making a mistake. There's so much more that you're going to need to learn. You're going to need to learn about people. You want to learn about relationships. Nothing gets done. You see, this is a fascinating example. I even teach a case study to my MBA students on this topic, which is just because you have the, quote, right answer to a problem doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. And that's a shock for smart people that are used to having, a test where they can get a score and they're great. But in the real world, when you work for an organization, not everybody wants that best answer. You got to convince them. You have to be able to influence them. You have to build the kind of the emotional intelligence, if you will, but the relationship skills, and you have to make it in their interest to say, yeah, you know what, I agree with you. I think that's the right answer. The third thing after opportunity and learning is agility, there's a lot of words we could say. Open-mindedness, adaptability, agility. You cannot predict everything that's going to happen. And in fact, many managers are even evaluated. The old term we used to use is tolerance for ambiguity. Sounds like a psychology term. It is, actually. Tolerance for ambiguity. It means being able to deal with stuff you couldn't have predicted and dealing with it in real time. Yeah. And that's a gigantic skill. And I think and this is not just for people starting their careers, this is people at any stage, that capability of having that open-mindedness and that ability, that agility is critical. And where does that come from? Learning is going to help for sure, but you have to also be willing to take a risk. And you have to be able to acknowledge if something's not going down the right path, or if you've made a mistake, you got to do something about that. So I wrote a book on that topic. The Why Smart Executives Fail book is very much about making mistakes and what happens when you don't fix them. A very smart CEO once told me, I don't have to be right all the time. If I'm right half the time, I'm going to be unbelievably successful, as long as I know that in the other half when I'm wrong, I do something about that. And that's this adaptability, adjustment, agility, flexibility. That's a gigantic skill. And so those are the three that I would highlight as really critical.
One of the things I'm sure all of our students are watching this right now going, well, those soft skills, that open-mindedness, that ambiguity, a lot of them are focused on just getting that right GPA. And what I think you're highlighting is it really depends on what you do outside the classroom to build those skills that you need. And so how do things like, what our society members are doing and going through a structured leadership program, or what other people are doing outside the classroom, how can they maximize those opportunities to build those three skills that you're talking about? Yeah,
the only way to do that is to throw yourself into projects. There's a theory of learning. The theory makes it sound like it's some esoteric. It's been shown time and time again. Some people call it 70-20-10. 70% of the time you should be doing something, action learning, if you will. 20% of the time is more pure one-on-one, and 10% is sitting in a classroom listening to somebody. And that, education unfortunately has it the opposite way. So that 70% is doing something. It's a project. Do extracurriculars. Get involved with Leadership Honor Society's fantastic curriculum that you've explained to me. I think also projects in school, extracurriculars, all kinds of activities, church groups. It could be anything. Volunteer politically. These are the two things. One is variety. People learn from variety, from different types of experiences, right? And then the second thing is give yourself that exercise, that practice of doing something, and it doesn't mean you're going to make a career out of that. You're investing a degree of time, amount of time, but the amount that you can learn, if you're really open to learning, is just gigantic. And I think those are the ways where you're gonna enhance, and actually very quickly enhance those leadership skills and these soft skills that we're talking about.
Great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the leadership styles and what students should be gearing themselves towards or away from as they're entering this workforce?
Right. Well, there's a lot of stuff out on leadership styles, and many companies will do various assessments of their managers so people know what their leadership style is. But there's a problem with it, because if I tell you what your leadership style is democratic, and you say, okay, that's who I am, that's innate to me, and therefore you treat everybody the same way, or if it's autocratic or paternalistic or whatever it happens to be, what it means is it gives you permission to behave in one way to everybody. And that is so illogical if you start to think about it. Think about the world of marketing and sales, for example, and how customized we've become. You go on Google and you're looking for something, you're typing in the search term, it finishes that search term almost before you're done, and there's an ad there. That's a little bit spooky, I got that. But compare that to how we manage people, and it's the opposite. Very few managers, very few leaders customize how they interact with each person. It's another thing millennials or young people in any event should be looking for. To what extent does my boss is my boss likely to actually want to know what makes me tick and what I need? Because it might not be the same as what the next person needs, or the next person needs around that. So for people thinking about leadership styles, I guess my primary advice is don't get hung up on that, because you're going to win more than you're going to lose if you can customize how to adapt. Again, adaptability, right? But customize how you work with people. And in a way, it's kind of obvious. Again, it's considered a radical notion in many companies, but it's really obvious, because think about your siblings. Are you the same as your brother or your sister? Even when they are twins, very often they're really different. And so what works for you, is it going to be exactly the same thing that your sister or your brother needs in a job? It's kind of laughable. Of course not. Everyone is going to be a little bit different. And that's the same family. So imagine you just take random people from anywhere. So customizing is really important, and don't get hung up on what your leadership style is. Anything you know about yourself, self-awareness, really great, so I'm not against that, but don't fall into the trap of saying, okay, this is who I am, therefore that's what I'm going to do for everyone and how I'm going to act with everyone. I don't think that's a winning approach.
That's really great advice for a lot of students as they're especially starting their careers. Thank you for that. What would you suggest to our members and our viewers watching today as far as finding their own passion, finding their own thing that they find insightful or find interesting to run after?
Well, if you do a lot of different things, you'll be exposed to more things. If you do one thing, you better pick right. And I think too many people try to specialize too early. And that's another reason why, if you're going to go to graduate school, I don't think it's a good idea to go to graduate school when you're 21 or 22, unless you are 100% sure that this is what you want to dedicate a significant portion of your life to. So I think a variety of different experiences opens the door to seeing different things and trying to figure out what it is you like, and not again just jobs, but extracurriculars and other activities. One of the best things you can do is find out something that you are just naturally better at than most other people. It turns out people really love doing things they're better at, so it kind of is a good thing. And then look for a career that enables where they value that type of skill set. So if you're really good at talking to people, you have great verbal communication skills, look for an industry or a career where that's really important. Good news is almost every industry that's important. If you're really good at kind of doing detailed mathematical analysis, look for a career where that's valued by people. So it's a match between what you innately are good at, which I think overlaps with what you like, not always, but I think usually, and then finding a place where that's going to pay off. I think that is that's kind of being analytical about this, but I think that could really be helpful.
Dr. Sid, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. And for our viewers, I hope that you've enjoyed the insights and hearing the stories from Dr. Sid on his own journey to leadership. And what we want to encourage you to do as you take that next step in your own professional and personal journeys, we want to encourage you to be a leader who makes a better world. Thanks for being with us today.